Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. Oh, my goodness. So much is going on. So much is going on. But you know what? We've got to pay attention to everything. As of this day, as we discussed yesterday, Governor Greg Abbott in Texas has actually set a date to fill the seat held by Sheila Jackson Lee, who passed in July of last year, Sylvester Turner, who passed just literally hours after the State of the Union address. But guess what? He's not going to have the election. That seat will remain unfilled until November.
Mhm.
So Democrats will be short a vote. Think about that, everybody. Think about that. This is how masterfully these people play the game. And they don't play the game. It's not about party, it's about power. Some people ride the donkey, some people are astride the elephant. You need to be clear on what this is really about. This is about disempowering or empowering people. We have to empower ourselves. Think about that. And we're going to be talking about restoration, reparations, repair. You've had, I've had this gentleman on the show before from the Empowerment Temple in Baltimore, Maryland. And of course, many of us uh, just embrace the Empowerment Temple because that's where we saw Pastor Jamal Bryant. Well, the person who's taken over for Pastor Jamal Bryant, a giant in the world of the church in his own right, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. I want you to get his book, Creating a Culture of Repair. That's right. Wow. Taking action on the road to reparations. There are a lot of things that we need to do. As we've got to talk about that as we're watching the erasure of Harriet Tubman. Now, they hurried up and they brought her back. Jackie Robinson brought him back. Medgar Evers, civil rights icon who was also a World War II veteran. Hmm. What's happening, everybody? Affirmative action was struck down in public and private educational institutions and really in the world, except in the military. That's where the carve out exists. They said, no, we're not going to have affirmative action. You cannot consider race in public and private education and in public and the private worlds of employment. But when it comes to the military, no, we will keep these programs in place. I wonder why. Well, black and brown people, poor white people are overrepresented in the military. Think about that. So, how do we make the case for reparations? What do we do about restoration and repair in this environment that is so hostile to Black people in particular? Let's think about that, everybody. Attorney Mark Fancher, part of the family here. Well, Pastor Turner's part of the family also. We can't get, I can barely get Attorney Mark Fancher. So I'm really glad that I've got both of you brilliant men on with us today because I think that this is a conversation that we really need to have. I want you all to go to meet me on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social, X at Santita J, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Please like and share, like and share, like and share. Thank you, everybody. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. I need to hear from you today because reparations, some people argue about that. I think we do need reparations. But you're saying that we need to create a culture first of repair. So before we bring in Attorney Mark Fancher, I want you to talk about that. And I'm telling you, I'm saying this in this context, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. Um, I was going through these Instagram and TikTok videos, and I was struck by a young lady who was performing before an audience. Certainly, it sounded like thousands of people. And she was wearing a dress that was so short, and her derriere was bared. So she was, I'm assuming, wearing a thong, but she turned and twerked to the audience, her bare bottom. I said, now, there's something that's going on here. Instead of having Roberta Flack and Aretha Franklin and Nancy Wilson and Sarah Vaughan and Ella and Dionne Warwick and Carmen McRae and Lena Horne, da, 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 now we have gone to women on the pole. Now, mind you, I am not diminishing women who are making it the best way that they can. Not going to do that. But I also know that there were some things that Dorothy Dandridge would not do. She said, I'm not going to play after I've been nominated for this Oscar. I'm not going to play Took Team in The King and I because I would be playing someone who's enslaved. I'm not going to do that to my people. You get somebody else to do that. I won't be that one. Angela Bassett turned down Monsters Ball. They said, This is your Oscar, Angela. She said, No, I don't want to even give the appearance of having a, a relationship, a problematic relationship with a white man. Let's put it that way. Just given Black women's history in America. We're living through some really interesting times, Reverend Dr. Turner. You know, when you had Black owned record companies, you didn't use the N word. Women were not called out of their names when they were Black owned. Now that we have Black overseers, all bets are off. And when I say Black overseers, they get white money and they oversee it and they oversee us. And look at what we've got. So you take it away. And Evangelist Jackson says it's time to get back to prayer. This nation needs it. Shalom, Robert. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. First of all, this code, you said, I mean, many people talk about reparations, but you're saying, wait, we must create a culture of repair on the road to reparations. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. First of all, as always, I am so immensely humbled and grateful to be on your show in your company. I'm thankful for the attention that you place on issues that are oftentimes ignored by others. So I thank God and I pray God for your and your family's continued health, wealth, and prosperity, especially during these tumultuous times. Um, as to the question of how do we and why is it important, history has taught us that as hard as it is to change the laws, once the laws are changed, if the citizenry has not adapted culturally to those laws, then those laws will simply be overridden. We saw it with emancipation. The law was, in the 13th Amendment, that the abolishment of slavery. It did not mean though that culturally people were ready for enslaved folk to be free. So what do we have? Slavery by another name, incarceration. And we had the beginnings of sharecropping and convict leasing. We saw it with integration when the laws changed, when Jim Crow was killed, right? That's what we thought. But we also saw culturally the country did not accept that. So we had the advent of several private academies all throughout America, especially in the South. And we had the creation of these country clubs, these exclusive country clubs that had membership that was prohibitive based on race and now economy, income. So with reparations, in order for it to be fully fulfilling, there needs to be more than, and I know, and there will be, and there has been in several cities across the nation, laws to create this reparations. But the culture itself has to be prepared, and the soil for. I'm from the South, so we don't have things just presented to us. That we have farmers that in order to have some potato chips, you got to grow some potatoes, right? But in order to grow potatoes, you got to put the seed in the soil. But before you put the seed in the soil has to be fertilized. It has to have the right fertilization and cultivation for the seed to produce its fruit. And so if you want the seed to last, now I believe in this book, the Bible, where Jesus talked about seeds thrown in different situations, and some of them throwing on rocks and they sprout up quick, throwing amongst weeds and they grow, but they get choked up. But those seeds planted on fertile ground, they last. And so this book helps understand how we can plant the seed of reparations in more fertile ground.
What do you make of this time that we're in? How do you make that case now? Because you saw the government push the DEI out,
Mm-hmm.
and which meant Jackie Robinson and his accomplishments in the military had to go.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is one of the icons of American life, and President Trump is now talking about this this area where they will have statues of heroes: Kobe Bryant, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, and others. Um, how do you make that case when they took Harriet Tubman out? They put her back in. She's the first woman. Not only did she lead the Underground Railroad, she's the first woman to lead a military battalion in the history of the United States. I mean, so she's made history as, as a woman. But there is a hostility out here. There's goodwill, but there is a hostility, Reverend Dr. Turner. I mean, how do you till this soil?
Right now, we are seeing the plants or the fruit of seeds that were planted in racism, and they're bearing fruit. We're seeing the fruit of trees that are planted in hatred. They're planted. The seeds of hatred are now bearing fruit. As a farmer in an agrarian society, you don't wait till you see trees to start to plant. You plant the seeds for today that you expect to break fruit or break harvest tomorrow. So this is the perfect time. This is the perfect time to plant those seeds. When you see right now, it seems that nothing is going our way, and everything that we had is now being turned back. This is the time to not go back into the house and say, well, we just won't eat, because if we don't plant the seed today, we will have no harvest for our children tomorrow. And the problem in our community is that we have rested on the seeds planted by those such as your father, by those such as Dr. King, by those such as Thurgood Marshall. We are still eating off the trees of the seeds that were planted generations ago. And we felt as though we had no seeds that we need to put into the ground and plant. And we're finding out that while we were waiting, while we were just sitting, others were planting seeds of evilness and hatred. And now those trees are bearing fruit. So it's really past time for us to put our seeds in the ground, to toil and to labor, and to, as we say in the South, hoe our row, with the hoe. We got to hoe our row, and we got to plow deep in order for those seeds to get into the ground.
But what do you make of this argument that, that says, a lot of people are very upset that critical race theory, that, Black history is being taken out of the schools. And I've always wondered about that. I said, because, that is not a complaint you hear from the Jewish community. They have Hebrew school. They don't even let you touch their history, because they teach it from their perspective to their children. What do you think?
Sadly, Black people, we are one of the only groups in the country that expects for their oppressors to teach their children, and get upset when the oppressors don't teach it right. We should have, as citizens, a level of expectation of our government to provide certain services, and they should. So the government should be teaching full history in our public schools. However, we know that this government has a propensity to not do right by Black people. I mean, and it has a historical issue with that. So while I still attack and am totally against the government taking out of history and changing history, and trying to literally whitewash history, and the removal of DEI projects, things of that sort, we should be teaching that to our children ourselves. And as a pastor, I challenge and encourage my colleagues in ministry to do that, not just during the Black History Months or doing, as in the AME Church, our Founders Day, but throughout the year, highlighting our history, because it is truly how we must pass down our seeds to future generations.
Attorney Mark Fancher, creating this culture of repair. You are one of the few people who's been saying that, this is as challenging as this time is, this is not this is not a time that we should be despairing. You're saying no, 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 no. This is a gift, and some people took umbrage with that. What do you mean?
No, what I mean by that is that the circumstances that we're dealing with, um, the reason that people are in shock and that they're going through trauma is that they're conscious of the fact that it's happening. The same things have been happening for generations. People were just not aware of the fact that they were happening because those who were carrying out that agenda were much smoother, were much smarter, were much more conscious of the need to cloak their evil. But the same kinds of things have been going on for generations, just a little bit slower. Not they've not been as obnoxious about it, and the effects have not been as immediate in some respects. But now, with this current administration, it's all on display and everybody can see exactly what's happening. And it provides the opportunity for people to become much more conscious, much more quickly. And I think that once you become much more conscious, then you begin to do the kinds of things that Reverend Turner is talking about. If we had been aware decades ago of how our kids were being miseducated, I mean, we knew, but we didn't worry about it, then we would have already set up our own schools. We would have been educating our children. We would have been doing it a long time ago. But because there was the rhetoric of fairness and democracy and education for all, and a belief that, well, maybe they're not quite getting it right, but they mean well, and they're going to bring about a different type of education for our kids, we just sat back and continued to think that, well, it's going to get better. It was never going to get better because there is a vested interest in the system in keeping our kids confused and ignorant and misdirected. Long time ago, we should have been educating our own kids, but now that it's in our face, now that we see, that there's no pretense made of any interest in trying to preserve our history and to try and use it for purposes of a weapon against oppression, now we know. And so now we might be motivated to move. But I think just generally, one of the things that I think that needs to be part of the culture that we've been talking about is a dimension of it that is focused on liberation. And the reason that I say that is because when we talk about reparations, the concept of reparations assumes that you have a population that is enduring intense oppression, if it's not been targeted as the target for war and warfare. And because there's been so much damage done to this population that it is necessary to repair them, right? Historically, when reparations have been paid, it has been after the war of the oppressed against the oppressor has been won. So that if you look at Nazi Germany, there was no effort to get Hitler to pay reparations to the Jewish community while he was sending them to concentration camps and into ovens. It was after World War II that they went to Germany and they said, you damaged these people and you must pay them reparations. The enemy had been vanquished. Those who were oppressed had overcome. And it was at that time that they were able to go and to say, pay reparations. Japan, which had been complicit with Nazi Germany and others during World War II, and which had invaded other Asian countries and had caused great problems, they too, after World War II, were asked to pay reparations, and they did to some of the countries that they had harmed. And there are many that say, well, there are other examples of reparations being paid uh, in the modern era, specifically to the descendants of those who were uh, Japanese or who were presumed to be Japanese and who had been interned during World War II. But you have to look very carefully at when that happened and why. Those reparations were paid in the late 1980s. And it was paid at a time when Japan itself had recovered and had an economy that was far outpacing the economy of the United States. The United States found itself in the position of having to win the favor of Japan in order for it to continue to improve its own economy and to regain traction and to rebuild it. And so one of the things that they did in order to try and get the favor of the Japanese government was to pay reparations to those who were survivors and descendants of those who had been taken into the camps during World War II. So when we talk about Black people, in particular, African people in this country, we're still in the midst of a war. We're still oppressed. We have not overcome. We've made progress in our war, but we're not in a position yet where we're able to make a demand for reparations and expect that it's going to be taken seriously. We're still in the position of those, just like the Jews who were being marched into concentration camps, for them to have at that point said, pay us reparations so that we can galvanize ourselves, so that we can reinforce ourselves, and so that we can go to war against you and overcome you, would have been laughable to the Nazi regime. They would have said, what, you think we're going to pay you to try and come after us? And I think that's what happens with us when we make demands for reparations. There is a vested interest in maintaining control over us. There is an interest among those in power in keeping us ignorant, in keeping us disempowered, and keeping us ineffective. And the last thing that they want to do is to pay us money that will help us get out of our situation. So I think we need to be aware of that. And while reparations are certainly, we're entitled to those. I mean, all measures of justice say that we must have them for all the horrific things that have happened to our people over generations. The question is, are we at a historic moment when that's something that we can effectively demand? And that's why I say that there needs to be an element of this struggle that is focused on liberation, on us overcoming the enemy, overcoming oppressive forces, and then coming back to them and saying, you're going to pay us reparations, whether you like it or not. If you don't pay it, we're going to take it.
Well, it does appear that you do have to come from a position of strength in order for people to appreciate and understand you. Reverend Dr. Turner, is it a dollar figure? I mean, because you've talked about institutional repair, you've talked about social repair, spiritual repair. I mean, you're saying that we need to be repaired on in a lot of different spaces on a lot of different levels. Could you explain that?
Yes, it is quite certain that the effects of white supremacy, the effects of Black exploitation and oppression, it went beyond, as terrible as it was bodily, it went beyond our bodies, right? It impacted our mental, even spiritual, for how they whitewashed the Bible. We have several examples to attest to that. But the remedies that I've read about only kind of have spoken to the financial piece, and the financial piece, the damages are severe, very much so severe. I've seen numbers from the hundreds of billions to trillions, tens to 20 trillions. But the most important part that we don't realize, and I think the brother just mentioned and alluded to, is is most of the damages, the harm starts once we came here to this nation as enslaved people, as chattel slaves, which is severe what happened to us here. But they did not, in the slave trade, they didn't kidnap enslaved people. They kidnapped noblemen, craftsmen, artisans. They kidnapped people who had homes, had tribes, had villages. And so when you start off the number with the suffering here, it discounts the possessions we had in our motherland, right? We had land there. We had a life there. We had income there. So really what the and the commission that I serve on, and the things that I'm doing here in Maryland, the clock for damages doesn't start when we came over here. It starts from where we were taken from, the land that has gold, rubies, diamonds, pearls, oil, all that on it. That's included in today's civil law society. It's akin to when you get hit in a car accident by 18-wheeler, and you get paid for, of course, your operation and your physical or whatnot. But you also, if you are held out of work, you are paid for the amount of money you would have made had you been able to go to work. And that's the difference in the amount. What's one of the nuances that I add. It's not just what we were forced to do here, the free labor we had to work here. It's also where they took us from. The most resource-rich continent on the face of the earth is where we hail from. Like, we didn't just come from caves. We didn't come from resource-poor Europe. We were kidnapped from resource-rich Africa, Kemet, right? Where they still are mining and taking and exploiting riches from our mother continent. So in my estimation, in my humble opinion, the estimations are too low. But it's not just financial. It is spiritual. And in my book, I list several examples of spiritual repair, truth telling about what the Bible, and because slavery was not just upheld by Christians, right? Every major religion in the world upheld slavery or some form of it. And my Asian brothers, they upheld still a caste system, right? Based on the color of skin. My Islam brothers, in Arab countries, they had slaves. They had people who owned folks who looked like us, right? And of course, even in the Old Testament, Jews, the Israelites, they had slaves, right? So slavery is not just a Christian creation. Unfortunately, the American form of slavery is the worst the world has ever seen, and they have to atone for that.
How do you make that case now? Because it seems that increasingly people do not want to hear it.
And that there goes the.
I mean, I'm saying even inside of the community,
Black folks, yeah.
TC was talking about, and Attorney Fancher, feel free to open up your mic and jump in, because the foundational Black Americans, and I'm appreciating where everybody's coming from. They are saying that, they're separating those of us in the diaspora, right? And it's like, wait a minute, we all came here on the same proposition, right? Even if some of these people don't get it. I mean, how do you make this argument? Because you not only have to make an argument to say white America, to the power structure, you also have to have a discussion within the Black community.
Yeah, and we have to understand the tactics of the enemy. We have those that we know we fight against because they categorically disagree with even the notion of reparations, right? We know that our right-wing conservative fellow citizens do not support reparations. They feel that some of them even have the audacity to say that they deserve reparations for fighting the Civil War, their ancestors. Like Black folks didn't fight for our own liberation. My great-great-grandfather fought for the Union to against the South in the Civil War. So Black folks fought in every battle this country's ever had. So I don't even entertain that argument. But we also have to admit that our adversary has supported black people to go against black people. We have to understand they had moles in the Black Panther Party. They had that. I mean, they had Nat Turner was turned in by a fellow brother, right? Denmark Vesey was trying to liberate folks and have rebellion. He was ratted out by a fellow brother. So we have to understand that there is also white supremacy in blackface, and just because somebody is my kin does not make them my kind. And by extension, we cannot start doing our oppressors bidding by dividing up our community based on when we came to this nation. And in fact, if you know history during enslavement, the slave ships stopped first in the islands, in the Jamaicas, in Haiti, and oftentimes in Trinidad. Oftentimes, that's where the seasoning ground took place, and they were seasoned over there. But after they stayed a few years in Trinidad and Haiti and Jamaica, they brought them over here to the States. And so there is a nuanced history with our people. But as far as black folk, the diaspora, everywhere we were shipped, we were enslaved. And in fact, the greatest number of enslaved people didn't even come to America. It came to South America in the Brazil area. So we just have to make sure when we're arguing for repair, and I do, that we have to know the adversary is very, very, very clever. And while they stand against you, they also send other folk who look like you to stand against you. And I've heard folks who want to just limit it to enslavement. And while enslavement is terrible, was the worst form of slavery the world has ever seen, our suffering did not stop in 1865. And as a lawyer, you don't try to go into a negotiating ceremony or situation limiting what you can receive. You include every piece of your suffering. Our suffering didn't stop. In fact, if our suffering had stopped at 1865, we wouldn't have to worry about the race massacres in Tulsa or East St. Louis or Atlanta. If our suffering stopped at 1865, we would not need a Brown versus Board of Education. If our suffering stopped at 1865, we would need the 7 Montgomery March. That whole argument about just slavery reparations really shows a short-sightedness of our suffering in this nation. That really, to be quite honest, if you look at bank loans and if you look at mass incarceration, police brutality, our suffering still exists to this day.
Mark Fancher?
Yeah, I just will pick up on that point. I mean, there's a book written by Douglas Blackman called Slavery by Another Name, where he brilliantly demonstrates how chattel slavery, what we frequently regard as something that stopped in 1865, actually continued for another 100 years in different forms, in the form of the convict lease system, in terms of chain gangs, in terms of the debt tenancy system, in terms of a number of different ways in which up until the 1960s, we still had basically chattel slavery. So that's a continuing thing. But I think that what's missing among many in our community is an understanding of the fact that our problem is, as Dr. Turner has been talking about, much broader than just, the experience in North America. To limit it to that is very much like saying that you want to know what's in a book, and you're only going to read the first 30 pages of a book that's about 300 pages long, and you think that you know what the book is about. If we're clear on our situation, we'll understand that it has everything to do with Africa and the attack that was made on Africa, and that ultimately this is not really a racial issue. It's a political and an economic one, where race has been strategically used in order to advance that agenda. So that they recognized early on, as early as the 15th century, that Africa was a place where they could go in and they could exploit it. The first thing that they did to exploit it was to deprive it of human beings, and to steal them, to kidnap them out, and to force them into labor. And, as Dr. Turner said, these were not just any old, this wasn't just, a June bug from around the corner that they would pick up and put on those ships. They went and they found the most brilliant people. They found the strongest people physically. They found the most creative and intelligent people. And those are the ones that they wanted to enslave because they knew that it took a special kind of person to survive the Middle Passage. And they did an excellent job, because you look at people who had been enslaved for centuries and who emerged from it, and within the space of 5 and 6 years had really stabilized their communities and had begun to prosper. Who does that? I mean, it has to be some amazing people that do that. And that this has always been the focus. Africa and its descendants have always been the focus of, and it have been at the heart of the process of empire building. Because in 1885, all of the different European countries convened in Berlin, and they took a map of Africa out, and they said, well, we're done with pulling people out of Africa now. Now we want to go after the mineral wealth there. We want to go after the natural resources. And we've up to now been scrambling for Africa. We've been fighting each other for it. There's enough of Africa for all of us white people to enjoy. And so they started carving Africa up into different pieces. And, Portugal took some, the British took some, the French took some, Belgium took some. All of these different European countries, took a piece of Africa and began to colonize it and began to exploit it and to deprive it of its, not only now they've depopulated it, but now they're taking all of its natural resources and its natural wealth. And the diaspora that was created by the slave trade, where you had African communities all over the world, now placed parts of Africa in all of these different countries that were functioning as colonizers. And an early realization that if these African people who were physically removed from Africa, if they ever recognized their connection to it and the fact that they had been forcefully removed from it, and if they ever came together and decided that they were going to come together, go home and retake it, then it would cut the legs out from underneath the entire empire. That everything that sustains Western civilization is found in Africa. Western civilization, Western economies, Western wealth all depends on maintaining control of Africa. And the first thing that they want to do is to make sure that Africa never reclaims itself, that Africans never reclaim it, because then it puts them in the position of calling the shots for the rest of the world. And so when you have people who come along and say, well, I don't want anything to do with Africa, I'm wed to this land that they took me to, that this is where I will fight, this is where I will live, this is where I will die, and I want nothing to do with anybody else, it is self-defeating. And in fact, if you dig deep enough and if you analyze it close enough, you'll find that the very idea that you have in your head about you being wed to this land and being dependent upon this government and this economy, that idea did not come from anybody in your community. It came from your enemies who planted that in there. There are telltale signs that say that this did not come from us. This was part of the psychological warfare that's being waged against us in order to keep us confused and ignorant. And the fact is that, in the process of taking us out of, Africa, we have had the opportunity to come into unity and communion and community with many other different communities. And so we have come to not be, a racial group so much as a group that has shared political interests and shared economic interests with other communities. And we realize that many of these other communities that we've been in contact with, whether it's the First Nations peoples, the indigenous peoples of the Americas, sometimes called Indians, whether it's the communities in Central and South America, whether it's communities in Asia that have been historically exploited by Western imperialism, whether it's the Palestinians who have been subjugated as a result of Zionism. All of these different communities, if you look at them, the other thing that we have in common with them, other than just an affinity or a community with many of them on an informal and a cultural level, is a political shared identity in terms of them having the same enemies that we have. And so the objective of many of us who are Pan-Africanists is to reclaim Africa by, first of all, kicking out all of the foreign exploiting forces and interests, and then uniting Africa as one country, the United States of Africa, uniting the continent, and then making it the most powerful force on the planet. And once that happens, then Africa becomes the force that's able to call the shots for all of its children who have been stolen and have been dispersed around the country, around the world. And not only for people of African descent, but for other struggling communities, whether it's the Palestinians, the indigenous peoples, whether it's the people in Northern Ireland, whether it's any number of people in South and Central America who are struggling against oppressive forces. Africa is able to assist them too. And it's all about defeating the empire. It's all about defeating those who control the planet. And once we have done that, then we can go to these people who have caused so much misery and so much suffering for generations and say, we've taken stock of how you've damaged us. We've taken stock of how you've injured us. And we calculate the price to be however many trillions of dollars that we think it is. And we think you're going to pay it, and you're going to pay it right away. And if they hesitate even one moment, then all we have to do is flex our muscles economically, militarily, politically, in every other way, and they will write the check, and it will not bounce.
Why did that resonate with you, Reverend Dr. Turner?
I love every word. I love every word. And I think it resonates with me because it speaks to the comprehensiveness of our people and our problems, right? We cannot think to solve the problem of Black man in America if we act like it has nothing to do with the Black man in South America or in our mother continent. We've all suffered from the same. Now, while the governments may be different, the suffering is all similar. And I think that as we are people who were shipped through continents, taken from mother continent Africa, brought first to Central America, South America, and then now we call North America, and then taking the Middle Passage was taken back to Europe. Our problems cannot expect to be fully solved unless we see how the impact was not just here. Because guess what? The adversaries, they all collaborate. The African leaders, the white African leaders. There's a reason why Donald Trump feels and says what he says about South Africa, right? They still collaborate with European leaders. They still collaborate with those who have regimes in South and Central America, and of course in the United States. So if the perpetrators can collaborate in continuing their oppression, those who suffer from their oppression should definitely be should be collaborating with each other. And I feel this is one of the only ways in bringing about true comprehensive repair.
Well, what do you say to Lisa? Lisa says, hey, Lisa, how you doing today, sweetie? She said, how do you make the case for those of us who have multiracial ancestry? And so, I mean, speak to her. She said, how do we know that we are owed reparations when we've integrated into America with other races? Anybody want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I would. I don't. That's the problem, I think, with making reparations the beginning and the end of everything. Reparations is part of what we do in order to make ourselves whole.
Mhm.
And we just make an assessment of what we need as oppressed people. And for those who are multiracial, let's say that you're part African, you're part European, you're part Native American. You have all of those things. All of that means is that you got triple struggle. You got to struggle for African people, you got to struggle for poor white people, you got to struggle for Native American people. And you got to do it. I mean, because as human beings, and ultimately that's who we are. That's our responsibility to God and to ourselves. And if as a result of your struggles and as a result of your suffering, you determine that in order to make you and your family whole with your multiracial background, whatever it may be, you need this or that in the way of money or resources or whatever it is, that's what you get. I mean, and so it's not a strict drawing a line saying, we have to do a lineage test on you. We have to do, figure out blood quantum and all of that. That's not what this is about. This is about being humane. This is about loving one another, as Jesus instructed us to do. And we look at each other's needs and we provide for them. And if that involves, helping to build somebody a house, then that's what we do. If that means getting a certain amount of reparations for somebody, that's what we do. We're just trying to make sure that everybody has what they need.
Reverend Dr. Turner?
Yeah, I think it's laughable, honestly. Anytime that there is societal benefits to a people, that those in the majority and who have been seen as a majority try to find ways in benefiting from that. We saw it even in Oklahoma when they were giving out land to those of tribes, right? And the Dawes Rolls. We saw a great influx of Europeans coming to the territories claiming that they were indigenous. And because of their privilege, they were able to pay a minimal fee of $5 and be considered Indian. That's where the phrase $5 Indian come from. They literally paid $5 and they were given access and put on the Dawes Roll. That's why you have, Native American folks who look as white as sheet of paper because they were able to pay and buy into that. And the same thing we see recently with public policy initiatives such as affirmative action and even DEI, right? The largest beneficiary of affirmative action are white women. Same thing with welfare. Anytime there's a benefit that the government gives to people, white folks find a way to benefit from it. So absolutely, once bills are passed to support reparations, you're going to have every white person, not every, but you're going to have some white folks try to claim that African ancestry. Well, my question for them would be, what did you put on the census in the last 20 years? What you claimed then, and whatever you claim then, you stick with that. Stay right over there. But if you claim Black in 20 years ago on your college applications, or if you claim Black on government documents, then we have a different conversation. But this happens all the time. And unfortunately, they find a way to seek through the cracks because they still have white privilege.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, brother.
Yeah, but I think that phenomenon happens because we live within a capitalist economy and a capitalist society, which presents as just a given that there is just so much that you're able to have, whoever you might be, that the vast majority of the resources and the wealth belong only to a few. Powerful corporations and powerful families and billionaires and oligarchs. That belongs to us as the elite. We have it. The rest of you need to fight over the remaining crumbs that we drop from the table. And so when a few crumbs are dropped, then everybody gravitates toward them because they're so desperate. And ultimately what this country needs is to overthrow the elite. Because this country has more than enough resources to try and to provide for the needs of everybody 5 and 6 times over. We have the resources to do that. And the reason that the resources are not available to the masses of the people is because they're being hoarded by the elite few. And so that's the importance of revolution and eliminating the capitalist system.
And I would add on to that even still, when there are government initiatives given out to help, what we call today so-called minorities. I don't like using the word minorities.
Me that I don't use it.
Yeah, but white folks in power find ways to take advantage, so to speak, quote unquote minority business loans. What white men have done is put their wives over the business on paper so that they can qualify for these minority business loans. And so you have on paper them being run by white women, but in actuality, they're overseen by white men. So
and that's the American way.
And exactly, and
that's quote unquote good business.
And so with along those same lines, when the government gives out subsidies to farmers, right? The white farmers are the one who have already wealth. They're the ones who've qualified and who get the funds. Meanwhile, the black farmers who actually need the subsidies, they are left out in the cold and have to actually sue to be included with something that was given out freely to everyone else.
But see, this is why we have to have conversations like this. And Lisa, I've appreciated your contributions. You said you've been claiming other for 60 years. I hear you.
Other ain't black though, last I checked.
No, I mean, I hear you. I mean, and the thing is, it's something, it's a game that's played with us. I mean, and I saw it so clearly when I went to South Africa, and I said, whew, am I glad that the one drop rule was in effect in the United States, because it broke a lot of, it gave us unity, right? And I remember when my father was about to run for president the first time, my mother, who's so sharp, and you've met her, Reverend Dr. Turner, she's brilliant. She said, now be prepared. They're about to be, your father's not going to be black anymore. He's about to be mixed. I said, what? She said, oh yeah. She said, no, they got to do that. She said, they're going to dig up his background and they're not going to have to work hard because it's right there. And they went to Greenville, South Carolina, where he is from. And Greenville has next to it an area called Easley, which, is one of these areas where, white men and black women married, common law, or actually married, right? And they were able to raise their families. This is pre-loving, right? And so the GQ article posed the question. We went to his hometown, and before they went into his family background and people that they met, they said, if there were a cowboy and Indian fight, what side would he be on? And my mother said, I told you, this is the game that they're going to play. She said, but don't fall for it. Because really, we're all in the same basket, everybody. Sally Hemings was not free. And her children were not free either. They had to escape into freedom. Think about that. But that's why we need to create a culture of repair, because this is how broken we are. But there are a lot of steps that we've got to take. We've got to take action on the road to reparations, because we're not just there, and that's one of the things that I love about the book, because I'm on my third reading of it, because you have to step back and think, because reparations is something that's debated within the Black community, not just in the white community. It's something, some of us say, we don't need that, and I don't need a handout. I'm like, whoa, hold on. People come here and they look for repair. And the Japanese deserved reparations and repair. And one of the reasons that when you deal with, they do what we do. They either flip to the progressive side, hardcore progressives, or they're very, very conservative. And those who are very conservative are white. Those who are hardcore progressives never forget being interred here and being othered here. And they will let you know they are our brothers and sisters in the struggle. And they in California are calling for Black people to get reparations. So everybody, you need to understand that we need it. But Reverend Dr. Turner, we've got to have this discussion on the way to reparations. Because if we're going to get it, if we're going to get reparations, we have to speak with one voice.
That's right.
I mean, if we don't speak with one voice, it's not going to happen. I'm going to give you the closing remarks, but Attorney Mark Fancher, I've got about 3 or 4 more minutes left for everybody. So a couple of minutes to you, and then a couple of minutes to Reverend Dr. Turner. Attorney Mark Fancher. See, I conflated you guys.
I'd be honored. No, I think that, as I said earlier, reparations is a method of trying to make people whole, but it can't become the beginning and the end of our struggle, of what our struggle is all about. Our struggle is against empire. Our struggle is for liberation. Our struggle is for elevating all of humanity. And I think that as we wage that struggle, that we not forget the lessons that have already been taught and that we should have learned about how it should be waged. The first Christian community, after Jesus ascended, was a community that was made up of many different types of ethnic and racial groups, and it numbered in the thousands. And all of them were committed to 2 things. One was to loving God, serving, and spreading the gospel of Jesus. And the other was living in community and loving one another. And I think that that's what it has to be about, that we can't limit ourselves to saying that we want to only love people who have a certain bloodline and who live in a certain place, and that somehow that is a formula for us to achieve what we're trying to achieve, here or any place else. That the community of people who have been oppressed by a common enemy, by multinational corporations and capitalists, by billionaires and others, the military-industrial complex, that is a community that's global. And it involves people of many different racial backgrounds and lineages and whatever. We all need to come together and unite in a fight against those forces. Once we eliminate those forces, then, with God's help, we're on the road to becoming who we hope to be as a human family.
How do we create this culture of repair? Reverend Dr. Turner, what are the steps we need to take to get on the road to reparations? Because you didn't even start at reparations. You said, hey, y'all, wait a minute. There's a lot of work that we have to do before we even get there.
But first, I think listening to truth tellers such as yourself and your show, by elevating those who aim to elevate this type conversation, supporting both by our viewership and by our donations, shows such as yours, and also having a tough conversation and giving out the facts like Brother Mark mentioned so well during this conversation, and also fighting, right? Listening, collaborating, and also fighting. I think that's a muscle that or a method that we have stopped using as much. Like fighting, we can learn, we can collaborate. That's amongst each other. That's sometimes by ourselves. But fighting involves and sometimes going to where the action is happening, where the harm is being done. We have unfortunately become a spectator or video. We take videos of suffering, but we don't get involved in the suffering. And I as I begin to take my next walk on next Wednesday, April 16th, the anniversary of the Compensated Emancipation Act of Washington of 1862 for Washington, D.C., where the government, Abraham Lincoln, paid up to $300 per enslaved person to the slave owner for them to be free. 3,000 plus slaves in the D.C. area during that time never got a check from the government, but the folks who owned them did. So I'll be marching to the White House to continue the fight and elevate the awareness and the cause for what happened to those folks. And we need more of that, not just reactionary after somebody gets killed or shot, but in season and out of season. They are not going to give us anything. This country never has, probably never will. Everything we ever received came after we fought, and some died. So we must continue in that vein to bring reparations and true liberation to our people.
Reverend Dr. Robert Turner, creating a culture of repair, taking action on the road to reparations. Attorney Mark Fancher. It's always such a joy to be with you all today. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show, creating a culture of repair. Today, we are taking action on the road to reparations. Reverend Dr. Robert Turner comes from a very powerful tradition of AME preachers and just free preachers. You know, when you look at the history of that church, Black people, we thank Richard Allen for refusing to be in a segregated house of worship. And they went on and broke away and created their own church. And we thank God for the African Methodist Episcopal Church. But they have a fine tradition of freedom fighters, the Bryant family. And you know, the beautiful part of the Bryant family is that they have not held on. They have continued to inspire. And the next generation of leadership that have taken over the pulpit that was once occupied by Pastor Jamal Bryant, who's now gone on to new birth down in Atlanta, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. So excited that he's here. And of course, our friend and brother beloved, Attorney Mark Fancher. I wanted you to explain, if you would, you have been taking, I met you several years ago in Tulsa. You were standing in front of the City Hall in Tulsa, literally by yourself, holding up a sign, drawing attention to the repair that the people of Tulsa needed. First time a bomb was dropped in the United States of America was dropped by white Americans on Black Americans in Tulsa. Blew them out of their neighborhood, blew up their generational wealth. But it happened in Rosewood, it happened all over the country, but it happened in Tulsa, and it resonates with us very profoundly. And when we sojourned down to Tulsa in 2021, Reverend Jesse Jackson said, the reason we're here is because of Reverend Dr. Turner, because he looked like someone who maybe was half out of his mind, standing in front of that City Hall, Attorney Mark Fancher, just standing in front. And eventually, people started coming and standing with him. Because maybe they were no longer afraid. Maybe they were no longer ashamed. Maybe, because that's the way it works, right? Dr. King, the largest group that he spoke to, aside from the March on Washington, was the anti-Vietnam March in New York City. You know, he didn't really speak to large groups of people. He didn't. And now he has been moved to Baltimore. One of the things we love about the AME Church is that they move you, it's an institutional church. They move you from city to city, from district to district, and you get a chance to spread the gospel wherever you go. And now you are in Baltimore at the Empowerment Temple, which is aptly named. Fine tradition that you're in. And here you're kicking up some more trouble. Good trouble. But you are walking from Baltimore, Attorney Fancher, to Washington. How often do you do that? Okay, you're on mute.
Every single month, I have done this sojourn from Baltimore to the White House. This is my 31st time on April 16th.
How long does it take you?
Depending upon the weather, 13, 14, at most 18 hours. Now, the one I did from Selma to Montgomery, that took me 20 hours. That's 54 miles. The same route that Dr. King took. He did it in 5 days. I did it in 20 hours. It was almost killed me.
Why are you doing this?
Because I feel burning passion and conviction from God to do this in remembrance of our ancestors, and to bring awareness to the need for repair for the worst form of slavery, but not just slavery, Jim Crow, and white supremacy the world has ever seen.
So when you take your walk, I think it is, you said on April 16th,
Man,
what are you trying to draw attention to?
the fact that this nation has yet to give reparations to Black people. And on the 16th, it is in remembrance of the Compensated Emancipation Act that was signed in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln to compensate, to emancipate the enslaved, but to compensate the enslavers up to $300 per slave in DC, and calling the country to remember that they still hadn't paid the right folks. They paid the wrong people. They paid the enslavers, but never once paid those who were enslaved.
Attorney Mark Fancher, what is that about? We see all that in Haiti. You know, Haitians had to pay the French. Oh, what is that? I mean, the slave masters get paid, but there is a debate about the enslaved getting compensation. What is that?
Well, it's whoever is in power manages to call the tune. And that has been what it's about. There are two standards of justice. When the oppressor gets paid what they're owed, then that's justice. When the oppressor gets paid for something that the oppressor is not owed to the detriment of the oppressed, that's justice. So they win both ways. And when the oppressed gets paid what they're owed, that's injustice. Let's get with the program.
You know, and what did you, Michelangelo Bosch says, and let's not forget the bombing conducted by the city of Philadelphia with a Black mayor, Mayor Wilson Good, against the Black Liberation Organization MOVE in 1985. Oh, I remember that well, in May of 1985. And it was very painful to watch. Very, very painful to watch. And I remember going to Philadelphia, maybe, oh my goodness, a week or two later. Bill Cosby and David Brenner. You remember the comedian David Brenner? He passed away some years ago, but he was a proud man of Philly. He always talked about being from Philly, loved Philly. They were having a benefit in the park. Because Bill Cosby's always been a man of great and high conscience and conscientiousness. And they were headlining a benefit for the families of MOVE. I want you all to remember that, because as we've watched Bill Cosby, Dr. Bill Cosby's legacy take a beating, please don't let that happen. Nobody is perfect. People are human and they are who they are, and we're all quite complex. But if you look at his body of work, he has done everything that he could to lift all people, and Black people up in particular. Please don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget that. Reverend Dr. Turner, what do you want to, what is the end point? What do you want out of this march? And what do you want to highlight? Because many of us don't even know that in the District of Columbia, that the slave masters were compensated. This is just unbelievable. It just doesn't stop. Reverend Dr. Turner.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. And so that's part of the purpose for the walk to DC, is to remind this country that America doesn't have problems paying people money. America doesn't have a problem with reparations. What America does, even in 2025, America has a problem with Black folks, has a problem doing right by Black folks. If you can pay some of the worst people that ever have walk the face of the earth, people who own other folks, if you can pay them, then most certainly you should be able to pay those who they force to work for nothing.
But what is that about? I mean, and why do Black people tend to have a problem with it? Because I mean, some of us really feel that we don't deserve it. And this happened so long ago. I mean, I've heard other people say it because a, a comedian who I have enjoyed in the past, um, basically he was saying that, he didn't believe in reparations for Black people. He said, because I didn't enslave anybody, and my grandparents didn't enslave anybody. And, many people will say, we immigrated to this country and we didn't participate in that. I said, but you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. You immigrated into a country that we built. And you were able to come to this country and get opportunity because the country had been built by people who were not paid on land that was not paid for. So everybody owes Black folks. Everybody owes indigenous people, Reverend Dr. Turner.
They do. No, and we feel because we have this white supremacist notion actually that Black folks have not worked for what we have, and everything we have is given to us. We don't want to be seen as being receiving of something that we didn't earn, and that's why you have ignorant statements made by Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas that he didn't benefit from affirmative action. Like, I mean, are you kidding me? But we have to say that type of stuff. Some of us feel because they have this internal battle going on that they don't deserve what they have because they've really listened to the lie. And the truth of the matter is, no group in the nation has worked as hard and received as little as Black folk. And that's just a fact. We and the part of the reason why reparations is important and why I do my monthly walks is because not only did we build this nation, right? We built the wealth of this nation. We built this nation physically. Pretty much every building you see built before 1865 was built by free Black hands. And even after that, as the brother mentioned earlier, free labor was still going on in terms of convict leasing and things of that sort. And
I
even
mean,
to
the
this
White
day,
House, all the monuments,
all the monuments, all your historic churches. I mean, all of those things were built by Black hands, free labor, enslaved people. But not only that, we Black people fought in every war, paid taxes to a government that gave us subpar treatment. So if you don't like the word reparations, consider reparations really to be a refund check to Black folks who have paid taxes to go to schools they could never attend, to build buildings they couldn't go in, couldn't work for, and to see their dollars go to other communities with no input from them, and to see our dollars go and to pay the Japanese Americans, and it should be reparations, to see in the South our tax dollars go to pay the pension of the Confederate soldiers who had just killed American soldiers. And then when the Confederate soldiers died, Black tax dollars went to pay the widows of those Confederate soldiers. And when those widows died, Black tax dollars went to pay for the burial grounds of those Confederate soldiers.
Wait a minute, people who committed treason.
People who committed treason and killed American soldiers, right? To fought to uphold slavery, the state's rights to have slaves. And then to this day, like right now, I have property in Alabama. My parents still live there. My siblings live there. Niece and nephew live there. Black tax dollars are going to subsidize Confederate memorials in Alabama, in Georgia, in Tennessee. Black tax dollars, right? So we still are paying for what white supremacists did, and they get benefits from it. But we never once said, "Well, I need my refund check," or "That ain't fair." I didn't fight for the Confederates. Why am I paying their descendants, or why am I paying for their Confederate memorials? So this country owes black folk who have fought at every war, built this nation, and to this very day, April 8th, 2025, subsidizing Confederate memorial cemeteries.
Lisa, you've been raising some profound questions today and making some profound points. You said, well, wait, didn't our government pay reparations to help rebuild other nations, combining what you said after the world wars? Yes, we did.
Absolutely.
But they were European nations.
Mm-hmm.
That's important for us to.
And our nation just is cutting checks to Ukraine
Right now.
Right? We ain't Russia. We didn't cause that. We didn't go and try to take land from them, but our nation is paying Ukraine, white nation, paying them, repairing them, right? And helping them fight. And black folks still to this day haven't gotten a check.
Do we need a check, or should it be an individual check, or is it establishing opportunity zones, for want of another term? Making sure that we have our banks.
It's in the book.
HBCU.
It's both and. It's all of the above and then some.
Mm-hmm.
I might make that t-shirt out of it. It's all the above and then some. Reparations. And then some. All the above and then some. Right? It is, and I don't subscribe to, as I stated in the earlier segment, just from slavery forward type of damages. I subscribe to the totality of those who were kidnapped before they came here till today, April 8th, 2025, and those damages. I don't stop at 1865 and I don't begin at 1619.
Why?
Because our suffering didn't stop at 1865 and our harm did not begin in 1619. Because they took us from a place. They didn't just kidnap slaves. They kidnapped kings, queens, noblemen, people who had land. And the land to this day is still valuable. So if you're going to compensate, make sure you compensate for all of who they were and what they had, not just who this country made them to be, which is a slave.
So would you does that apply to all Black people? Because some people would say this should only apply to people who were slaves in the United States. Or do you extend that to those of us in the diaspora who come here?
I feel that the diaspora is something we all collectively should fight for reparations from the governments in which we live in.
And Lisa, you said, I don't know. Looks like we paid illegal immigrants way more with our tax dollars who contributed nothing to America. Sorry. You know what? I hear you. The problem is this, though. When you look at Venezuela, we have wanted their oil, which is among the most valuable in the world. We have tried to conduct coups. We have destabilized their currency. We've destabilized their government. And that is why we have so many Venezuelans here, for example. And we have been paying them. I keep telling you all about the Tent Partnership for Refugees. There was a memo of understanding signed for this program by our Secretary of State, former Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. He signed it, and the person who brought this program to him was the man who created Kobani Yogurt, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. Mm-hmm. And this is a program that brings in refugees to the Western world. People from the so-called global South, Venezuela, Colombia, every place else, so they can work for cheap. Now they're trying to arrange it so there'll be seasonal workers. Remember, we have not learned the lesson yet, Lisa, because what we are doing is this country was built not by free labor, but by unpaid labor. That's how we do things here. So as we look at these brown people who are brought in and Black people who are being brought into the country, let us be very clear that we're destabilizing their homes. That's why they're here. That's why they're here. They're not. Who wants to leave sunny, beautiful Venezuela and come to cold Chicago and be homeless? Really? And because that's what's happening. And yes, have monies been set aside, but that's a global project, Lisa. You know, who wants their oil? Ask all the big oil companies. Because when I've gone down to these places with Reverend, that's who's there. All these oil companies that we see and these military contractors who are from the United States, that they're there. You and I don't feel it. We don't directly benefit from it, but other people do. I hear you, Lisa. You say you understand my point. I'm just saying, if you understand that this is about so much more than what we see, that's why I try to bring these pieces of information to you, because this is not that we're not being told the whole story. That's why I brought to you the story yesterday about Texas, a reliably Democratic district that has a lot of Black people in it, will be denied a congressperson, a vote in Congress until November. Until November, because the government is playing games. Governor Greg Abbott could call an election for Sheila Jackson Lee and Sylvester Turner's seat tomorrow. He could do it. He could call it for next week. He wants to wait until November. They're still going to be voting on bills until November. But he is going to absolutely guarantee that they are denied a voice and that Democrats are denied a vote. And I'm not a hardcore partisan, but I do think it's unfair. I'm saying Americans should fight for us, but we don't. We don't care about us. These people don't observe borders, Lisa. They don't. They're globalists. They're not thinking about Americans. They're thinking about their monies. These people, I mean, they travel with special passports, and those who don't travel with special passports, their money, they get paid in lira, they get paid in the euro, they get paid in the yuan. They don't live the way the rest of us live. So were you talking about America first? Oh yeah, because my father would only get American cars. I get it. And that was 40 plus years ago. Many of us don't have the same allegiance. These people who run the world don't have the same allegiance to America. They live here much of the time, some of the time, or even all of the time. But they don't look at America the way that we do. That's why they don't mind gutting Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. That's why they talk about useless people, useless eaters. That's why they talk about people, there being too many people in the world. Pay attention to what everybody's saying. So I'm hearing you. I want people to care about Americans, but they don't. But I want them also to care about people, and they don't care about people at all. At all. So I want you to think about that. Think about that. They don't care about Americans. They don't care about anybody. They don't. Michael, you said it's about money, greed, power, and control. That's right. Absolutely. So think about that, honey. You know, while we're saying that we don't want the Venezuelans and the people from South and Central America here, who are actually indigenous people who speak Spanish. They speak the language of their conquerors. They are as Spanish as I am English. I am not British. I speak the British language because that's the language of my conqueror. Hispanics are not Spanish people. They are indigenous people who have been mixed with, the lighter ones have been mixed with the Europeans. But when they go to Spain, they get told real fast that they are not European. They're like, you are from the Americas. In other words, you're indigenous. Trust and believe. That's what happens. Which, again, the Black community gets kicked down under the illegals? No. The thing is that no one is illegal in the world. Everybody's legal. But I'm not playing that game, and I'm not going to let them play that game with me. And that's not something that I'm going to talk about here, because I think it's much bigger than that. And they're playing that. They're playing us. And they're playing us, so we're angry with them, and we're not angry with this welfare company called Boeing. that cannot keep a plane in the sky safely. Left some people up in space for what, 9 months? By accident or on purpose, but they left them up there. They are one of the most heavily subsidized companies by our tax dollars. Elon Musk is wealthy off of our money. He's a government contractor. We are being gamed here. And they're not making enough money to do anything. Lisa, I mean, yeah. And you know what? The monies that they're being given should be given to Americans. We need to be fighting that fight. Instead, we're fighting poor people for their crumbs. We shouldn't be doing that. I want my share. Dr. King argued more than 50 years ago for creating a floor beneath which no human being should fall. But what did we do? We called him a communist. He was subject to communist influences. That's what we said. I mean, come on. What is that about? We're being gamed here. That's all I'm trying to say. We're being gamed. We're looking at the wrong target. We're aiming at people, and we're not aiming at power. We've got to grow up in our politics. Got to grow up in our politics. Look up the Tent Partnership for Refugees. These people, when you have this many people being brought in at the same time, it's a plan. It's a program, and these poor people are not in on the plan. They just happen to go the way the wind is blowing. Because we, the United States, we are crashing their economy because we want to put someone on top of their government of whom we approve, who will allow us to rape it, who will allow us to rape Venezuela. That's why we didn't like Castro. My grandmother used to go down there and chop sugarcane and pick beans. She said they were little more than slaves there. My grandmother was born poor. She was orphaned when she was 11 or 12. So she would get on the boat. She was from Florida, South Florida. But the borders were porous then. Florida didn't really become a state until they got Disney World down there. And they completely revolutionized that state. She said we were little more than slaves when I was in Cuba. Little more than slaves. Prostitution was rampant. That's what they did. These rich people went down there. Rich white folks, that was their playground. That was their playground. And they went down there and they had a good time on people. Castro stopped it. He shut it down. He said, I'm not going to let you turn our women into whores and work our men to death and disrespect them. We're not going to do that. So he was able to turn that country around and made them the most literate people in the hemisphere. And instead of exporting a fallen lifestyle, they export doctors and nurses all over the world. They are also OPEC eligible now. That's when we started trying to reopen these relations with them. About 2006 or so, it was found that they have one of the 20 largest deposits of oil off their coast. So now they, in time, will be able to join OPEC. That's how much oil they've got. So do you really think that these greedy people want these people to be free? No, they don't. These immigrants, these runaways, because they're running away. They're being run out of their country. Who wants to come to a place where they know they're not welcome? Nobody wants that. Are you trying to run someplace else? Well, if the economy crashes, you just might. You might try to go to another place where you think you might get a chance. You might get a shot. But heaven knows you don't want to leave America because it's your home. Other people feel that way about their countries too. Think about that, everybody. Other people feel some kind of way about their countries too. They love their countries too. They love living down the street or with their mamas and their daddies and their sisters and brothers and their aunts and uncles and their cousins. They love that. When you have to leave that alone, when you have to drop your family so that you can figure out a way to eat, there's something that's gone terribly wrong. When you look at these people, and do they have racism in their countries? Yes. And do they come here with all that? Yes. But we've been too blessed to look down on anyone. And you have to look at racism as the sickness that it is. And don't you get caught up in it. I don't care how you feel about me. What matters is how I feel about you and how I treat you. That's what God is going to hold me, you, and everybody else accountable for. God will hold you accountable for what you know and for what you do and for what you do not do. And that's it. The big fight we've got is getting our Social Security back and getting more of it. The big fight that we've got is to get our Medicare and Medicaid back. The big fight that we've got is to have affordable housing. The big fight we've got is to get education on the academic and vocational tracks. Those are the big fights that we have. We should not be punching down. We need to be punching up and getting what we deserve from this American dream. It is becoming a nightmare for too many people. So think about that. Don't turn on each other, turn to each other. Let's get with the program. Get with the program. And know that anytime you see this many people running into America, running away from home, there's something that has gone seriously awry in their house. Think of a child who runs away from home. Children don't run away from a happy home. They run away from broken homes. And when you have inflation that makes milk unaffordable, basic foods unaffordable, and living unaffordable, you'd get out of Venezuela too. But believe me, that's engineered. That has been put into motion so that these people will leave there because they would like Venezuela. The powerful would like nothing more than to have a Venezuela, for example, without Venezuelans. Because see, if they leave, then they can have all the oil to themselves. Think about that. These people are not running to America. They're running away from home. So let's get clear on that. Let's get real clear on what we're really looking at, okay? I hear you. You know, I can go on a tear about this, but I don't want us to miss the real point. And I think that far too many of us are missing the real point. We're missing what's really going on here. And we're being played. We are being played. In the meantime, that's not bringing Social Security back, Medicare and Medicaid back. Speaker Johnson is going to cut Social Security. More than 40% of his district depends upon it. More than 40% of his district depends upon Social Security, and he's cutting it. What? He represents a district in Louisiana. What? That's the fight. And you know what? If they can come up with money for these people, they print it all day, every day, then they can come up with money for Americans. But we need to not fall into that trick bag either. I'm going to tell you why. Because whenever Americans ask for their fair share, we call them welfare queens. We talk down to them. We don't like the poor here. We don't like people who are struggling. Let's get clear on that. So when we say on one hand that we want Americans, let's take care of Americans. No, you don't want to take care of Americans. People don't want to do that. Because when we put programs in place to take care of Americans, we have contempt for those Americans who those programs take care of. We shame the people who need the help. Think about that. We do a lot of shaming. So let's get with the program. Think about that, everybody. Think about it. Think about it. These folks not running to America, they're running away from home. And why are they running away from home? Failed states. Not because people don't know how to govern themselves, but because we are trying to take over their countries like other people are trying to take over ours. It's a disgrace. You're right. It's a disgrace. And after 400 years on the American project, we've been here almost 500 years since the Spanish project began, really in the 1530s, because Christopher Columbus, genius that he was, an explorer who got lost. We've been over here a long time and we haven't figured it out yet. This is a colonial project. Colonial projects are for the rich. They're not for the poor. This government was not formed by us. This is something we evolved into being. There is a wonderful book about Lincoln by Lerone Bennett, the brilliant historian from Johnson Publishing Company. Thank God John Johnson had the foresight to hire an historian who used to write in Ebony and Jet all the time, and in Freedom Ways magazine, which was an intellectual publication, an academic publication that Johnson Publishing Company had many, many years ago. The book is entitled Forced into Glory, and it describes the challenge that Lincoln faced. He said that if he could keep slavery and keep the Union together, he would have done it. Remember, they had the American Colonization Society. They were trying to send Black people back to Africa. They did not want us to stay. We were not citizens until after the 15th Amendment, 14th Amendment, 15th. Yeah. See, because they were still trying to debate whether we were going to be citizens after we built the country, after we'd been here for a few hundred years. And whenever you see these Venezuelans, they are indigenous people. They are indigenous to the Americas. We are indigenous to Africa. Be clear on that. They speak Spanish, but they're not Spanish. If you don't believe it, go to Spain and they will tell you, because they are Europeans. The Spaniards let you know that they are European. They are not like the Hispanics here. They let you know. So come on, get clear on what we're looking at here. Get clear. I'm not going to fight these people who are being ushered into the United States. They're being brought in. Governor Greg Abbott in Texas could drive them back across the border. He does not do that. He drives them across the border, across the Texas border, and brings them into the United States so they can go to work. This is a game they're playing, losing children along the way while they're trafficking them. You know that's a problem in America. There's some sick people who like children. It's sick. All of this is happening. But instead of turning to them, we're turning on them. That's a losing proposition, and the people at the top are laughing their way all the way to the bank. They're playing with us. We're being played. Oh, you went to my parents' house on T Street in D.C., Michael? Yep, they still have that house. So, hey, I just want you to think about these things, okay? Think about them. Think about these things. Think about them. Play the game. Don't get played by the game. These people are not our enemies. The Isley Brothers had a song, Fight the Power. The powerful have positioned themselves as our enemies, and it's sad because they shouldn't do that. Think about it. Think of how powerful we are. Remember when we had the George Floyd protest? It, of course, fell during championship season for the NBA. Remember the NBA players decided during the playoffs that they were not going to play their game. And everybody went crazy. Oh, because guess what? No NBA players, no league. They could have done a complete reset on labor in America and the world. But Barack Obama started calling, and then he called LeBron James and Barack and other people started calling and said this, that, and the third. Well, you know what? The best thing you could do in honor of George Floyd is play that game. That's what George would want you to do. Really? Oh, okay. Wow. Think about that. They had an opportunity and they were willing to do it. If they had had some guidance from some people whom they respected, if they had the right guidance, look at what they could have done. Because they felt their power. They decided they were not going to play the game in more ways than one. And all the cameras and all the people were waiting for the game to be played, and the players refused to go onto the court. What if they had had a full-on strike? That's a multi-billion-dollar industry that they have now opened in Africa, that they are now opening throughout the world. I want y'all to start thinking. I love you. It has been great. It has been great. It has been great. It has been great. Hey, send me a message, Michael, over on Santita, Jackson, and Friends. Send that to me, please. Over on Santita, Jackson, and Friends. Send me a message over there, and let's stay in touch. Okay? And I love all of you. It's been wonderful being with you today, and thank you for being so engaged. Thank you for being so engaged. And everybody, let's keep thinking. Keep thinking, keep thinking, keep thinking. Keep thinking. We're going to get there. We are going to get there. I know we're going to get there. We are. But we got to start thinking. And you got to aim at the right target. We keep, believe it or not, aiming the gun at ourselves. I don't believe in the guns and all of that. But I'm just saying we keep aiming at ourselves. We keep shooting ourselves in the foot. And we're limping along. And we're missing the people who really oppress us. These Venezuelans who are here, they're not our oppressors. They're not denying you one dime of Social Security money. They're not jamming up your Medicare and Medicaid. They're not your problem. That's why I let you all understand about that Lima Declaration from 1975. They set in place globalization. Trump didn't start this. No, he didn't. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just saying, look, Mark Fancher has said to you many, many times that the errand boys and errand girls for empire are the president and the vice president. That's what we're seeing. You're seeing it every day. You're seeing it every day, every single day. So I want you all to start thinking. Start thinking, really, and start analyzing. Don't leave it to somebody else to think for you and to analyze for you. If you do that, you will not be free. It is your responsibility to get the information and to start thinking for yourselves. It's your responsibility. It's your country. It's your world. All of this injustice is allowed to proliferate because we allow it. When we stop it, when we decide on the day that we change our minds and we don't want to have segregation anymore, we stop riding the bus. They sustained that boycott for a year. Through rain, snow, sleet, and hail, those people walked all over Montgomery. And they inspired people to walk all over the country. They wouldn't move until things changed. And when the bus company from Chicago, mind you, was losing money, because the bus company that was that was used in Montgomery was a Chicago company. They said, no, we got to change this because we are losing money. That was as much an economic decision as it was a social decision. And guess what? The Supreme Court followed suit. They didn't have some sudden attack of conscience. No. America is a corporation. Money makes the world go round here. And when these people said, enough, and we decided that we were not going to empower people with our dollars who would not respect us, everything changed. Robert, Trump is just the gasoline on the existing fire. And we're the ones who have to put the fire out. We're the ones who have to march and vote and maybe sit in on the mall in Washington, D.C. and let people know that we're not playing with them. We're the ones who have to make the decision about the kind of society that we want to have. That's our decision. And we have the power to make this country what it's supposed to be. We have the power to make this world what it's supposed to be. But we're the ones who have to make it happen. Nobody's going to hand freedom to us. Nobody's going to hand a fair world to us. I tell you what, you can say whatever you want to about Elon Musk. You're not going to outwork him. You're not going to outrest him. He's up before most people and he goes to bed after most people. The people who run the world think that way. When I was a little girl, I was in high school. And I like to get to high school by 6:30 in the morning, 6:45, because I like to get breakfast. And then I wanted to go to the library because my first class was either at 8 or 8:45. And I was very, very rigid about my schedule. And so one morning, my father had a meeting downtown. I think his meeting was at 6:30. And so he said, baby, I'll drive you to school. Now, mind you, my father always had a lot of security. So I didn't see them there, and it unsettled me because my father got a lot of death threats routinely. So I didn't feel comfortable with my father not traveling with someone who was protecting him, who was, But when my father wanted to drive me somewhere, I knew he wanted to be alone with me because it was something important that he wanted to share. So, okay. I understood that part. So as we were riding downtown, and it was just before daybreak, because it was still cool, so it was beginning to get light. So the lights downtown and all the buildings were on, and you could see them because they were in stark relief against a brightening sky. And my father said, baby, do you notice anything? He said, look up there. And I looked at the tops of the buildings and I said, He said, all the lights are on at the top. I said, oh, okay. I'm going to have a meeting today with the chairman of Standard Oil of Indiana. And the only time in his day and mine that we had time to meet one another is for our breakfast at 6:30 in the morning. I said, okay. He said, just remember this. The people who run the world are up before everybody and they go to bed after everybody. They also take care of themselves. They don't do drugs. They don't drink. They work out. They take care of themselves because you cannot be sober. You cannot be drunk and a drug addict and out of shape and function, particularly if you're going to function under a lot of pressure. Let that be a lesson to everybody. So in order to run our country, we're going to have to become more involved. and become more energized. The country doesn't run by itself. Now, either we're going to have a monarchy, you hear me say it all the time, a constitutional monarchy or a constitutional republic. A constitutional monarchy is what the revolution was about. We broke that up. We broke that off. We have a constitutional republic, which means we have some democratic elements, but the people run the country under a republic. We run this. So we're going to have to become even more involved. One march ain't going to get it. You have to organize your blocks, your neighborhoods, your areas, your cities, your towns. We have to organize so that we can make a more perfect union, so that we can make the country into what it is that we want it to be. We're the ones. Hands off, hands on. Put your nose to the grindstone. Let's work this out. It's our country. It's our world. God made us stewards over all of this. We cannot be sheep led to the slaughter. We have to be human beings who God made us to be, and take over our country. Let's do it. We can. We have the power. So let's make this happen. So think about this, everybody. I know I talked a little bit, but I hope you got something out of it today. May God bless you. I hope that you will like and share the show, like and share the show, like and share the show, like and share the show. That's right. We have to organize and stay woke. That's right. Wake up. Dreaming is important, but dreaming shows you what you're supposed to be doing when you're awake. Dreams are important. They're important. And being awake is important too. Once you dream, what are you going to do when you're awake? Let's do it, everybody. I love you. May God bless you. Follow me on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social, and X at Santita J, and the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Please become my friend there. I cannot bring you into my social media space through the Santita Jackson page. It has to be through the Santita Jackson and Friends page, okay? So please get on over there and become my friend. And then everybody like and share this show, like and subscribe on the Santita Jackson Show. On the Santita Jackson Show, I need you to do that. It's been a joy being with you today. May God bless you real good. Take care, and thank you for being with me. Thank you for allowing me to share this time and space with you. It is my profound honor. I love you, everybody. Have a good one.